Hello everyone, we're here in Surrey at the home of Lynn Russell, the infamous queen of the show ring, and we're also with Caroline Murray, the equine nutritionist from Bailey's Horse Feeds. Bailey's sponsor Lynn, and she will tell you in a moment herself that she just couldn't do without them. Now the world of feeding is obviously a minefield, so today we're going to try and give you some information about how this has worked for Lynn and how important it is for her horses. So Caroline, if we can come to you first, just tell us a little bit about your role at Bailey's and how people can contact you for nutritional advice.
Okay, well basically based in the office, but we do a lot of yard visits, so we'll go out if anybody requires any information. Often it's quite a lot more helpful for us to see the horses rather than just discussing them over the phone. If that's not possible, we have a helpline number, so people are able to contact us through that, through our website as well. There's web inquiry forms. You can email us direct. Myself and my colleagues will respond back to you direct, or as I say, we can arrange to come out. We do a lot of get involved with some clinics with people, with Lynn, with other riders, and also doing a lot of like presentations, talks with riding clubs, and other associations like that.
And I think it's really important to mention that as a horse owner, if you just trudge along to your local tack shop, your local feed store, you walk in, the people there haven't necessarily got the knowledge to advise you on what type of feed to buy. So that's when we try and steer people towards ringing people like yourself. Because every horse is different, right?
That's right, yeah. I mean, all horses, when you go to buy your feed, then obviously the people there will have a general idea, but they will be concentrating more on what they have in their shop as opposed to possibly the specific requirements of your horse as an individual. So we always recommend, and if you're just a little bit unsure, it takes 2 seconds to pick up the phone and just ask the question, and you may be along the right, the right lines, or you may need a little bit more advice. But it's always worth double checking.
Yeah, because I tend to find people on livery yards and they tend to follow whatever's happening on that yard. So they may have a show cob on the yard and an ex-race horse and an eventer, and obviously the three things need completely different nutrition. Is that right?
Definitely, and we get a lot of that whereby there will be a yard and you have a complete mix of horses, sizes, breeds, workloads, but you'll often find, particularly if it is a livery yard and feed is in with your bill, that they all will be fed a scoop of this and a scoop of that, no matter what their actual specific requirements are. And that's when a lot of problems, not only temperament but clinical issues, can arise as well.
And we're going to be talking to you later on. You're going to do a series of videos for us to add to follow this one about temperament and feeding, all the different things, so we'll get more into that later on. Now, your relationship with Lynn, why do Bailey sponsor somebody like Lynn? What are the benefits for you?
Well, I mean, as you've seen, Lynn's very successful in what she does with her horses, and feeding does come into that, and you can see the results of the horses and the way that they're produced, in combination with a feeding, a fitting plan, a schooling plan. All works very closely together.
Lynn, tell us a little bit about that. So how important is it?
Feeding for me is absolutely paramount. The first thing I do, and I mean, you've seen pictures I showed you earlier of horses when I first buy them. The first thing I do when a horse comes in the yard is to worm it. We worm it with Equimax because it's pointless me feeding the horse and putting all that nutrition in if it's going in one end and out the other. But feeding for me is absolutely paramount, because without the food, I can't get the muscle tone, I can't get the coat condition, and I can't get the performance. So everything I feed is Bailey's. It has been for the last 23 years, and I hope it's another 23 years, please. And as I say, I could not work without it. And I am very lucky, because if you think to what you've just been told by Caroline, you go into a livery yard and they all get a scoop of this and a scoop of that. I'm not in that position. I can look at each horse as an independent person. I can select that feed. I can make that feed for it. I don't have to count the nuts. I don't have to count the amounts of outshine. I can feed them. And you've seen when you've looked around the horses just how well they are.
And it not necessarily has to be an increase and a more of a cost. I think people suddenly associate picking up the phone to a nutritionist that it's going to cost them more, and they're going to...
No,
and that's not necessarily the case, is it? A lot of the time you will tell them to cut it by half or take away a lot.
I think the danger that people run into feeding horses, and it is difficult. I mean, I'm lucky I'm on site. a lot of people have DIY liveries, feed their own horses, and they're in a position where they can perhaps feel that they give the horse 2 feeds a day, so they give 2 massive feeds. Now, I will feed exactly the same, but I will feed little and often, and the horse can only digest a certain amount. So by feeding little and often, I can feed the same as perhaps Caroline can feed her horse twice a day, but I can get much more condition on it because I can do it through intervals. And it doesn't perhaps cost any more, but it's much more cost effective because I'm in that position.
That is an important point to make, because a lot of the time you can actually simplify the diet for a person, you know, that calls, and also to remember that by simplifying the actual diet, the actual base of the feed, you often cut out a lot of these supplements that are added as well, and that cuts costs dramatically.
I don't need any supplements at all.
Oh, really?
No,
That's
not
a really interesting point.
The only thing that I add to what I call the basic feed is Bailey's Outshine.
Which we'll go into later about what all these things are. Now, we've all got a picture in our little hands that I'd just like to hold up. These are some of Lynn's horses. I hope you can all see that. Lynn, tell us just a little bit about each one, just in case anyone was doubting what Lynn's talking about with the nutrition.
Well, if you don't believe me, if you turn on the back, it will tell you the age that the picture was taken, and it will then tell you the age that the bottom picture is.
Okay, so the one Lynn's holding, you're literally talking about 9 months.
Yes, that was a 4-year-old when I first bought him, and that was him 9 months later.
Wow.
Okay, and that is down to, first of all, the worming, but secondly, the feeding, and thirdly, my expert training.
Yeah, well, of course, it goes without saying. And who's Caroline got here? This is a bit
Caroline's got a very successful horse that I now don't own. I've recently sold it to a very good friend of mine who does my website, Carol West. He's called Zenith. That was him when I first bought him in Ireland, and that was him, hang on a second, a year on. He was very successful as a coloured horse and a heavyweight show cob.
And who have I got here?
That one you've got is Blue Moon. That was a picture of him, I think, as a 4-year-old, and that was a picture of him a year. Well, not quite a year in actual fact. That would have been in May, when one of his first outings at Newbury. So that's probably about 9 months later.
Now, with these horses that we've just seen, just for an example, would you have fed them all the same, or would you then speak to Caroline and have something different?
Well, actually, I don't need to speak to Caroline because I've been doing it probably longer than she has. No, but basically what I do, first of all, as I've said, I worm them. Yeah. Secondly, I put them on very small feeds, and we actually start them on things like the everyday mix and Bailey's number 2 nuts, because you can't suddenly get a horse that's not used to hard feed and put it on high protein number 4 nuts and performance mixes and things, because its digestive system is not used to it. So I start with small basic feeds, and then over a period of time I then build it up and change the feed to more conditioning, more weight bearing, etc. But you can't just start thinking, oh, I've bought this horse Monday, I'll give it 4 feeds a day, because come Wednesday you're going to have a problem.
And I think that the message here is the help and the advice is there. It's free, it's at the end of the phone.
Exactly.
And every 6 months, pick the
I
phone
mean,
up,
very
because it
occasionally,
changes.
and it would be very occasionally, I might phone Bailey's up for some advice. I mean, I can remember in 2007 when I had Lynn, my racehorse. He was very difficult to feed because he had stomach ulcers, which was something I'd never come across before. Right. And at that time, I get on very well with Liz. Yeah. I mean, I've known Liz a long time. She's been there nearly as long as me. Yeah. And I phoned Liz up, and she said, well, have you tried, the prep mix, and have you tried number 6? And I go, no, I haven't. And have you tried this? And have you tried that? So we tried all of that, and it worked. Yeah. But it is very difficult. Yeah. And occasionally, even me as a professional, I have to phone up and get the odd bit of advice. It's not often.
Perfect. Right, well, we're going to carry on today and make some more specific to help everybody out. But for the meantime, Caroline, Lynn, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.